My name is Rambo, and I work for Zinpro Performance Minerals, or Zinpro Corporation. I've been with the company about a year now, and I am part of the Research and Nutritional Services group. Managing parity structure and its impact on lifetime productivity of sow and ultimately the economic impact of a system can have some very big consequences and is a challenge for systems to manage. The big thing to avoid is what we would call a bimodal distribution, where we have a lot of young sows, P0s and P1s entering the herd, and a lot of old sows out here. And if you just looked at that in terms of an average parity structure, you're going to be close to the middle, but your actual distribution of sows is going to be out here on both ends of the spectrum. It depends on what literature you look at as far as what the best number is in terms of how many P0s and P1s do you have and how many older sows do you have. The literature would say anywhere from 30 up to 50% of the sows entering the herd should be parity zeros or ones, and then those distributions, depending on where you start at, are going to change from there. The big take-home message, though, is that once sows get past parity 4 or 5, their productivity and ultimately profitability starts to decline. The big thing that I think producers need to focus on is losing these early parity sows, because that is a very expensive investment, and the research would also indicate that they don't pay for themselves until they've had a second litter. So when you lose those young sows because of a variety of different reasons, that's a very big financial loss that producers can experience. The other thing, if we start thinking about these fully integrated systems that recognize the value of that out in finishing, becomes even more important, because those pigs farrowed to gilt litters are going to typically be lighter birth weight pigs that have lower feed efficiency and lower carcass value when we take them all the way to the end of the finishing period, which is further detrimental to the profitability of a system. Reasons that sows get culled, there's many different reasons, and you can very broadly describe it as voluntary or involuntary. And so voluntary reasons for culling a sow would be because she's an old sow in the herd. So age is one of the big things that we see as a reason for culling. Poor reproductive performance, particularly when we start looking at older parity sows, is something that could maybe go both ways, as voluntary or involuntary, but typically that would be one. If we have an older sow that's falling out in her productivity, then that would be a voluntary cull. The other reasons that we would have would be reproductive failure, and again, depending on the parity, would indicate is that voluntary or involuntary. But another one that often is forgotten about is lameness. And actually lameness or locomotion disorders often ranks as one of the third highest reasons for culling sows within a herd. And that is one that I think that I would define as involuntary, and it's also one that we can work on preventing. Age is obviously inevitable, and those sows, as they make it to older parities, there's nothing we can do to prevent that. But lameness and to some extent reproductive failure are two things that I think can be managed. Lameness, especially if we look at our mineral nutrition programs, those things can be adjusted to improve the locomotion of sows, improve claw health, reduce lameness. And if you do those things, then there's a lot of other processes that will follow. Lameness and feed intake during lactation are really closely tied to each other. And so if we can help mitigate lameness during lactation, we can help drive feed intake, which is another thing that we can focus on or that producers can focus on to help reduce those sows that are culled due to reproductive failure coming out of lactation. So I would say two very important things. Focus on ways to reduce lameness, either through animal selection, that goes all the way back to gilt selection and development, the appropriate mineral nutrition programs, and also the appropriate management of those animals in the system, but then also stimulating feed intake during lactation to help prevent reproductive failure are two key areas I think are extremely important.